What's going on, everybody? You found Bottom Tier Collector. I'm your host, BTC. I got a mid-tier story from a bottom tier collector. But before we go into the story, let's hear from our sponsors.
Oh, I like it when you talk dirty.
Therefore, I am now going to drive over there, baby. Oh, I just had phone sex. Oh.
I'm in between compendiums right now, and I thought about, as I'm finishing up omnibus and compendiums, to just keep on rolling with them and maybe read more than 4 omnibus / compendiums, but I'm actually choosing to just pace myself and just read an omnibus or a compendium every 3 months this year. That's just kind of the goal, and I'm in between books right now, so I needed some reading material. I'm caught up on all my new comic book day books, so I went to the library. The June budget video is going to be funny. I was a good boy this month. I sat on my hands. I didn't spend any more money than I had planned for this month, and going to the library kept me from spending money. I picked up a novel, a Star Wars novel, Dawn of the Jedi. I won't be showcasing that book or anything, but I figured while I'm in between, because it's going to be a while before I can get the Lobo Compendium. That's the next big, huge reading project I have on my list for this year. And it's just going to be a little bit before I can get that compendium. It just released this week, I believe. And so I'm in between. I need something to read. I need something to keep me going so I'm not tempted. Got a little money in the nest egg now, in the comic book honeypot to I could go to the store and buy some comic books, but that's not really what I want to do because it's not really that much money. So, going to the library, picking up Dawn of the Jedi and Dark Knight Returns is what I picked up for my comic book reading. Helps me not to spend all that money that I have in the honeypot. So I feel like this is one of those seminal Batman stories. If you like superheroes, if you don't like superheroes, if you like horror, if you like science fiction, fantasy, adventure, romance, drama, thriller, whatever your interests are, I just feel like this story, in terms of how it's perceived and celebrated, kind of transcends the genre. So many people celebrate and talk highly of this book and have read it, and so I thought, I am an open Batman hater. I love Adam West Batman, I love Christian Bale Batman, and I love Bruce Timm Batman. Those are my 3 favorite Batmans. Don't really care about Batman in the comics. In fact, I hate comic book Batman, and this comic book kind of goes into that. Now, I'm known as a walkthrough review guy, showing every page, going through as much detail as I can, picking out all the nuance of every comic book, spoiling the hell out of a comic book. And I'm not going to do that here. You don't have to fast forward. I'm not going to ruin the story for you. I feel like this story is just old enough that there's a new crop of fans that have yet to experience The Dark Knight Returns, and I don't want to spoil that for them. I would want to, my goal with this video, I'd want to excite you or interest you enough to read this story. So let's get into it, guys. Alright, so Dark Knight Returns, right? It's a dark, gritty story about an older, aging Bruce Wayne. He's been retired for 10 years. And Frank Miller doesn't really explain the point of Batman, the driving force behind him coming back. He just kind of does come back. And I get the idea that Batman comes back because of how bad the crime is in Gotham. It's terrible. They show these news clips that I think the Todd Father heavily drew inspiration from in Spawn. You get these news anchor segments where news anchors are explaining the plots and stuff for you. They're kind of, Batman's seeing these news segments and seeing how bad the crime of this gang of mutants is just doing, committing atrocities in the city. Crime is at an all-time high because Batman's been retired. he comes out of retirement as an old man, and there's a very realistic take. There's a scene where he talks about his legs cramping while he's doing which Frank Miller acknowledges doing the Spider-Man pose on top of a gargoyle. And he begins fighting back, right? Again, I just don't want to say too much, but this book goes really deep. If you want it to go deep, you can pick up a lot of political themes, and not necessarily Republican versus Democrat. I don't really mean that at all. It's just there's themes of, it makes you ponder, does Batman mentally and physically abuse children? And I don't mean sexually, get your mind out of the gutter. Frank Miller does not try to imply he's a rapist, but he does bring up the question in this story, is Batman's treatment of kids a good thing? We also bring up a question that a philosophy on Batman, if you will, that I personally believe. I believe Batman is an enabler of crime. Without saying too much, for those of you watching who may not have read the story, a certain well-known villain comes back from Arkham Asylum. He's been deemed cured, and then immediately goes, as soon as he's introduced back into society, immediately starts killing people. And it's estimated this guy has killed 600 people. Now, this is a philosophy I have on Batman, and Frank Miller, on the nose, brings up in 3 specific panels: a building blows up and Batman says, "I'll continue to count the bodies that I have murdered because I let you live." I believe in necessary evil sometimes. I believe in what Heath Ledger Joker says in The Dark Knight. Some people just want to watch the world burn. As progressive as I can be sometimes, as much as I like to believe in the good in people and that people can change, and that I would love to believe you could change the most wicked of hearts with some psychotherapy, I just believe some people just want to watch the world burn, and some people just need to be put down. Period. Plain and simple. And I think Batman's outright refusal to kill some of the people in his rogues gallery, almost knowing they're going to get back out and commit more crimes, makes Batman a villain. It makes him the bad guy. He's not protecting your city by not putting down the people that need to be put down. Frank Miller really dives into that. He also brings up how crime is sometimes inspired by Batman, and just by the crimes being inspired by Batman has nothing to do with Batman directly committing crime or enabling crime. It's just people out there in the streets that are inspired to mess with the Bat or be like the Bat, but they're in fact doing illegal things. That as well makes Batman a villain. That's a very interesting thought piece as well. There's a brief turn towards Nazism and how you need to deal with Nazis. That was a very over-the-top couple of pages there. Batman fighting off Nazis. Overall, I think there's more good than bad in this story, but the bad is pretty bad. The one thing that bothered me the most about this story is the panel layout. It made it kind of difficult to follow the story. At times, I was catching myself reading blurbs out of sequence in certain times, and I feel like that was taken away from the story, and I was missing some of the nuance. The pacing as well was kind of clunky in areas. It was. I felt like it would skip too much, and I would not understand how one panel was transitioning to the other. And then there was a couple times where I caught myself not realizing who was in the panel. I didn't recognize the character, and then Frank doesn't really walk your hand through who every character is. Kind of something you have to pick up on. For instance, if you don't know who Oliver Queen is, that's all I'm going to say. If you don't know who Oliver Queen is, you're not going to know that he's in this book. That's all I'll say about that. That was done very subtly, and I had to pick up on it for a second, because when he's introduced into the story, I was like, who is this guy? Just kind of weird. I don't like, again, even though some of this Batman is realistic, it shows a Batman that deals with cramping legs, that deals with aches and pains, that deals with, blacking out, that deals with being a step too slow. It's still an over-the-top Batman, and I just don't like that. I know Batman is supposed to be the peak physical human condition. He's supposed to be the best of humanity. But there's still certain things that happen in this story that just make him superhuman, and I do not like that. I want Batman to be a human. I don't want Batman to have a broken leg and then in the next panel he's getting out of bed ready to fight crime like nothing ever happened. That's not realistic. That is not a human. Humans don't do that. That is inhuman. He doesn't break his leg in this book. I'm just giving an example. Things like that happen. Just don't like the take on Batman. I don't like, but there's a point where throughout most of the story, Batman is the underdog. Batman goes from being viewed as the savior to now we're switching. I don't want to say too much. Certain events happen in the middle of the story, and then Batman is then viewed as the villain. And that is another thing Frank Miller touches on, is how media influences everybody's perception of things. There's also Ronald Reagan's in this story, and there's some sort of on-the-nose politics there with how he portrays Ronald Reagan. But it wasn't too in your face to where you'd want to puke if you were a Republican voter or anything. But it was definitely some on-the-nose jokes at Ronald Reagan in this story, which is odd because I've heard Frank Miller being accused of being a conservative, which doesn't align with a couple of those Ronald Reagan jokes. But so bringing it back around to the Batman thought, in the end, like Batman through the middle of the story is on the run, is being viewed as a villain, and then it's like everything he stands against. Because for me, Batman is not about control. Batman's more about controlled violence. He's not about control and order. He's just more about keeping the peace, a defender of the peace. He contradicts everything he stands for at the end. He gathers up an army, if you will, and tells Robin in the story that he is the law tonight. And that's not Batman. That's never been Batman. I don't know if it's just character growth, and this is Frank Miller showing this is Bruce's final straw. This is his last stand or whatever. But I just didn't like that either. And then the end, I won't spoil the end. I will say Superman is in this story, and I don't like his use of Superman at all. His take on Superman is garbage in this story. I've never thought of Superman as a government shill. Characters like Captain Atom, Rocket Red, I would dare to say even Martian Manhunter, any Green Lantern, Booster Gold, those kinds of characters I would consider would team up with the government, but not like a Batman. I would never consider Batman or Superman. No, I'm saying Batman. I got Batman on the mind, obviously. Would never consider Superman a government shield. Superman has always been about truth and justice, and that being above everything else. Kind of kind of like a Captain America take in Civil War the movie, which is odd to me because I would have taken Captain America as the government shield, not Iron Man. Iron Man would be the rebel that would go against the government. But yeah, kind of like a Captain America. Superman has that kind of view where he will work for the government until the government is not for truth and justice. Is how I picture Superman to be if he were real. And in Miller's take, which I guess this is just how Miller feels about Superman, Superman just at the behest of Ronald Reagan and the government just automatically, like a robot, goes and does Ronald Reagan and the government's bidding, which leads to the final act in The Dark Knight Rises. And I just didn't like that take at all. Now, I thought it was cool. This I will detail out a little bit. So if you don't like this, I'm sorry. But when it comes to Superman and writing Superman, sometimes you have to come up with a way to let's depower Superman a little bit so that the rest of the story can work with him and make it a little more interesting. And I thought how Miller depowered Superman to make the last act work a little better was pretty good. I don't want to say too much. I'll just leave it there. I just really like some of the final act, but then like the very end, like not the plot twist, but like just how it ends and like kind of the epilogue, the last page or two, I didn't like it all. And then in closing thoughts, one of the most irritating things about Batman to me is he always has a gadget, always has strategized a way out, he's just a guy with no powers, a guy in a cape who's half insane. I'm convinced Bruce Wayne is clinically insane because he does the same things over and over and over again, and they don't work. He's not saving Gotham. He's not cleaning. Gotham is not. You're going to read a Batman comic next week, and there's going to be crime in Gotham. Batman has done nothing to stop crime in Gotham, and he's an 80-year-old character or something of that nature. Bruce Wayne is clinically insane, right? I just can't stand that he's always just got some kind of gadget or strategy or some kind of thought or a prepared backup plan to get him out of any situation, and that happens in The Dark Knight Rises, and I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. It's a tale as old as time. It's boring. It's run its course. I think it would be interesting if Batman would actually lose for once. Let's kill Batman. We've broken his back before. Let's just kill him already. Well, we've killed him. We've killed him, and he found a way to get out of hell in Batman R.I.P. Thanks, Grant Morrison. So, what can't we do with Batman? Overall, I don't regret reading this story. Again, I like a lot of things about this story. I like how deep it is, how thought-provoking it is. The art, the art's mid. I'm not going to say the art's trash, but I'm not a Frank Miller guy. I'm just not. I didn't care for the art in this book. I expected the art to be a lot better. Did I have some expectation that it was going to be this movie poster-esque art that we see today with these just god-tier artists? No, I didn't expect it to be like an Alex Ross painting, but I have a fondness for 80s comics, and this is sub-tier art for even the 80s, and didn't care for that. But again, there's redeeming qualities about this book. This is not, for me personally, this is not the generational masterpiece that it says on the back of the book. Let me see here. Possibly the finest piece of comic art ever published in a popular edition. That's by Stephen King. One of the pillars of modern comics, the New York Times. I respect this book for what it is. I agree that this book helped spurn anyways, the modern age of comics. This is one of the pillars of the Copper Age of comics. But in the pantheon of where I rank The Dark Knight Rises, I think it's a letdown. I feel like I've read most of the pillars of the Copper Age by now. I've read Crisis on Infinite Earths. I've read Sandman. I've read Sandman in its entirety. I've read Crisis, all 60 issues of Crisis. I've read The Watchmen. I've read V for Vendetta. This ranks below all those stories, and I'm not a fan of V for Vendetta at all. I love the movie. V for Vendetta, the movie, is a masterpiece. One of the rare exceptions where the movie is a million times better than the source material. There's just so much fat in V for Vendetta, the comic, that doesn't need to be in it. That was unnecessary to the story, in my opinion. There's just so much nuance in V for Vendetta that doesn't. V for Vendetta is that kind of story that doesn't need nuance. And anyways, I'm sidetracking. Yeah, The Dark Knight Rises is still a decent story, though. It does, I still want to read Batman Year One. I feel like that's another 80s Copper Age, or maybe that's 90s. I don't remember when Year One comes out. I think it's an 80s book. But I do want to read Batman Year One. I would like to read Batman Nightfall. I read 597, Batman 597, Bane Breaks the Bat. And one of the greatest blurbs I ever read in a comic book written by Doug Munch is in Batman 597. Bane, I'm not going to quote it, but Bane talks about, I'll put the picture here, I'll put the panel here. What Bane says in that blurb is just so poetic. I would consider getting it tattooed on me if I was into that sort of thing. So yeah, there's other Batman stuff I'd like to read, and this didn't deter me from it. But again, yeah, I'm not meh. It was good. I had a good time with it, but it's not the greatest thing I've ever read. And The Watchmen is 10 times as deep and philosophical. Sandman is 10 times as deep and philosophical as The Dark Knight Returns. When I read Sandman, I was just like, my God, this transcends comic books. This could be taught. The first omnibus of Sandman could be taught in a literature class in college. I really think that's how polished and deep and mature that book is. Watchmen's one of those books where it's kind of hard to get through the first time, but the more you read it, the more you come back to it. You just unpack so much in The Watchmen. But here, it's deep, but it's surface level at the same time, and it's a Batman story in the end, through and through. And Batman's going to do what Batman does, and I don't care for it. Alright guys, hope I didn't trigger you too much. If you disagree with me, if you love The Dark Knight Returns, put it in the comments below. If you want to disagree and fight with me, let's go. Let's square off in the comments section. I'll do it. I love a good, healthy, constructive debate, as long as we're civil here. Guys, thank you for liking, subscribing, and watching. I hope I didn't spoil too much of this story. I hope I didn't gab too long. I hope I stayed coherent. And till next time.